I'm your host, Scott Norton, and welcome to At Large. On this show, I talk to world-class creatives who use business to bring their ideas to life. We'll hear about their creative practices, their most interesting stories, and the lessons that'll inspire you the way that they've inspired me. My guest today is Michael Dubin. You may know him from the unforgettable viral video that launched his company, Dollar Shave Club. Mike started Dollar Shave Club after coming across a warehouse full of razors and built the company to over 3 million members and a $1 billion sale to Unilever in 2016. Mike talks about the power of humor, the role of a leader, the obsession that overtakes entrepreneurs, and the new chapters of his life. Please enjoy my conversation with Michael Dubin. Tell me about your night last night.
Had a great night. Went to a party at my friend Scott's house. He had some yakitori.
And there's a mud water for you to sip on. A nice,
I've never had a mud
nice
water.
hot mud. Well, today is your chance.
Wow, this is interesting. So what's in a mud water?
It's cacao. It's masala chai spices. It has 1/7 the caffeine of a normal cup of coffee, so it's low caffeine. And this is a mud latte, so it has oat milk in it and a touch of maple syrup.
So it's no mushroom.
Oh, and also a number of functional mushrooms.
Wow.
Yes,
So
I
you
should.
left out
Yeah,
the main
I
ingredient.
left out incredibly
I
important.
get it. You're nervous.
Cordyceps, chaga, lion's mane
Wow.
for brain health.
So is this good for longevity?
I'm not going to make any functional claims about this, but you can go online and read all about it.
I have a bar I'm trying to hit.
Yeah, I am personally careful about choosing my language with what exactly supplements do and don't do. But for me, it has helped me reduce my caffeine consumption because I love coffee. And left to my own devices, I'll just drink so much of it that I can't think straight. And so what I like to do is have a coffee in the morning and then switch to mud so I get the mouthfeel of coffee without being too hyped.
Is Mud Water sponsoring this podcast?
They're providing the space.
Okay,
And
so we should at least
it's
give
an
them
in-kind. It is an in-kind.
We should remember to
sponsorship.
circle back every few minutes to talk about
How delicious the mud is?
Well, not just how delicious, but how well we're feeling and how fast our brains move.
Well,
How does it sound when I slug this mud water?
there's something grotesque about it, but there's also something appetizing about it.
All right.
So I thought that knowing you, perhaps that it might make sense to start with some improv,
Sure.
because I know that you are a man of improvising talents
Sure.
and a showman at heart,
No doubt.
below your steely exterior.
That's right. Would you say I have a steely exterior?
No, that's a bit of hyperbole.
Okay.
No, you're pretty friendly.
Okay.
Today, we're going to start with the question game. So in this game, one of us will ask a question in the scene, and then the next person can state something to move the scene forward, but it has to be in the form of a question. So we're only asking questions in these scenes. Real questions that end in question marks.
Okay.
So would you like to pick a non-geographic location?
And by non-geographic, you just mean like the beach or...
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, not necessarily a single place you find on a map.
Got it. Let's say a cruise.
Okay, we're on a cruise. And we are a captain and a very lowly staff member.
Great. Who's the captain? You're the captain?
Sure, I'll be the captain.
That's great. It feels right.
Yeah.
This is your
Okay.
podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Host this podcast, so I can be the captain.
Here we go.
Didn't I tell you to stay below deck?
Wouldn't you want to know that there's a big fire down in the engine room?
Do you think I'm blind?
I wonder if you smelled the smoke before you saw the flames.
Not a question.
I wonder if...
I wonder if it's not a question.
Oh, okay. You win.
All right.
Okay, great. I'm feeling loose. Let's skip the improv.
Okay, all right. Sounds good.
Let's jump right into it.
Okay. Well, Mike, it's great to have you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
You know, we met, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, something like that.
Feels right.
Because, as luck would have it, we both sold our companies to the same company,
Yep.
Unilever. And so we met there through one of our mutual kind of champion sponsors at the company. It was the CEO of the North American business. And I'm grateful for him for putting us together. And I think we don't need to rehash it because the Dollar Shave Club story is one that's very much been told in public. And I highly recommend, if you want to hear more about the story, Guy Raz did an excellent live interview for How I Built This, where you talk about the ins and outs of building the business. And you can look up, Mike on CNBC and hear that. We're not here to rehash that story, but just to get everyone current, put them in the right headspace. What is the 2-minute explainer on what Dollar Shave Club is and how it came to be?
Yeah, so Dollar Shave Club is a men's grooming company that started out as a razor subscription business. And so the initial insight I had when I was living in New York City, I remember very specifically a moment where I was headed home on the subway and I needed to get razors. And I just didn't feel like going into the Duane Reade and finding the Razor Fortress, which is always locked, and then finding the person with the key and then having to wait in the line. And I just said, screw it, I'll go home and I'll milk my old razor. And that's that's an inferior experience when you kind of milk the same old razor blade over and over and over. So I kind of had that observation that was a problem, although I didn't think of it as like, oh, I should go start a business around that problem. But I clocked it and I was like, that's a problem that I have. And as the entrepreneur's mind works, like you kind of start to realize, like, if you have the problem, there's probably millions of other people that have the same problem. And so, which is the problem of a frustrating razor buying experience, and then the suboptimal shaving experience that you get when you milk your blade over and over again. And then, of course, like, razors are really expensive historically, traditionally. So I had that observation. That was probably like 2007, 2006. And, cut to many years later, I bumped into my friend's wife's father at a cocktail party, and he was an importer of sorts and had a warehouse full of imported goods, including about 250,000 razors that had been manufactured abroad and brought to a warehouse in Rancho Cucamonga, California, where they sat for about 5 years until he met me at the party and asked me if I, having had some e-com experience and some web development experience and a career in marketing, if I would take those razors off his hands, if I wanted to take the razors off of his hands. And that's kind of where Dollar Shave Club was born. As soon as he asked me if I wanted the razors in the warehouse, I said, I remembered the insight that I had years before. And I said, yeah, I think we should create a affordably priced razor subscription business that alleviates the need to go to the store and, it shows up at your house and you don't have to think about milking your blade anymore.
Wonderful. What strikes me about this story, it's so interesting, is something you noticed, that the razor market, which had been controlled largely by like nearly a monopoly, maybe a duopoly, they had been developing and evolving, but in none of the areas that actually matter, right? So they were like adding a third blade and a fourth blade and a fifth blade, and they were trying to build all these features around moisturizers and like vibrating handles and all this kind of garbage. But the things that actually mattered, which was, is it convenient and available? Is it affordably and accessibly priced? And does it actually speak to young men, which is when people develop their shaving habits? It didn't really have any humor in it, right? Which is I think a really important part of masculinity and how you even present an accessory to masculinity and to young men. So good on you for like recognizing those things and kind of seeing a side door to enter this market.
Thank you.
Also, given the category that you were in, your brand was adjacent to masculinity. And masculinity is an inescapable part of how like razors, right, and men's grooming is positioned in America. Tell me a little bit about how you see masculinity in America today and how you approach masculinity for the brand.
I don't think that masculinity was in the forefront of my mind when crafting the brand or its voice. I think that the voice was very much my voice and how I communicate with the world. The brand voice felt like a very natural extension of my own. Of course, masculinity, we riffed on ideas of masculinity throughout my time there because masculinity became more and more part of the cultural conversation. And so we tried at different times to make different statements on that. I think it was really just about being yourself. And I think that started with me in the way that I showed up in the commercials or in any communication, really. I was just kind of unabashedly myself, which is great advice to anybody. And so, I don't know that there was inherently a this is masculine or not masculine, lens through which we were looking at any of that. I think we approach it more from a lens of self-confidence, and trying to get our consumer, which, by the way, 40+% of our customers were women. We just wanted to encourage people to be the most confident, highest, best version of themselves. I don't think we spent too much time thinking about the masculine versus the feminine. Is it time for another sponsor break?
Today's space is brought to you by MUD WTR.
Delicious.
With 1/7 the caffeine of coffee, it might switch the dominant lobe of your brain.
I think that's really
without
good.
a lobotomy.
I think that's really good. Will we get tagged? Will they tag us in their social?
They might. They might just do that.
I would hope.
Well, I have to tell you, I was a very loyal customer, and I say was because I have a beard now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but Sir Kensington himself has a resplendent mustache. And I was sort of fabled to be Sir Kensington's great-grandson, maybe. And so I, of course, also needed a mustache of sorts. And so I had a mustache from 2010 to about 2019. And as soon as I saw your famous video in 2012, I was a subscriber. And the Dollar Shave Club kept my mustache fresh and crisp and looking Kensingtonian for about 7 years. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, that's great. It makes me really happy.
Yes.
It's always nice to meet a fan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember year 2, they sent me like a pin that was like, you're part of the chairman's club.
Oh, yeah. You still have the pin?
I believe I do.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
I'll
bring it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, thanks. What's tomorrow morning for our listeners?
Tomorrow morning is our early morning Friday swim club called the Starfish. So we'll be hopping into the salt water and getting some cold exposure.
Is this the time when we invite an open invite to people who are interested?
Open invite. I think that we do it on a DM basis.
Okay.
So if you want to know where and when we meet, DM.
Not me.
SWH Norton.
Yeah. Stay out of my DMs.
Host of At Large. Because we don't want to have a throng of people, right? We got
Do we not?
keep it.
Well, listen, I don't want to hijack your podcast, but I do think it's worth a small pitch for Starfish.
Please be my guest.
This is an opportunity to come out in the mornings, all 4 seasons, jump in the cold Pacific Ocean, get the blood moving, treat it as a little bit of a cold plunge, and ultimately meet some very nice, interesting people doing interesting things. We have a mix of entrepreneurs, investors, people, artists. We've got all kinds of interesting folk. And so, if you want to join, reach out to
at SWH Norton.
Yep. So Santa Monica, Tower 26, right at the end of Ocean Park. And, we'd love to see you out there.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Going back to humor, what do you think that humor achieves? I mean, what is the role of humor in a brand?
If you're a brand trying to get a consumer's attention, you want to try to be memorable. What's a way to be memorable? One way is to evoke a visceral reaction of some kind or an emotional reaction of some kind. So you can do that. You can make people laugh. You can make people, hopefully you don't make people cry, but you can. A lot of brands use sort of a positive, sweet emotion to reach their consumer. But if you can evoke an emotional reaction of some kind, the consumer is going to remember you. And really that's what brands are, is it's an emotional relationship with your consumer. And so I think that, choosing humor, when you make somebody laugh, they don't forget that.
Great point. Going back to the evolutionary point, I've heard that we evolved to employ and practice humor as a way to show that we are non-threatening, which is a way of creating trust, a way of showing that you and I are friends and not enemies.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of truth to that.
And so it's a story that's been publicly celebrated and lauded, that you've done something incredibly unique and rare and consequential and also lucky, which is within the course of about 5 or 6 years, you built this business from founding to selling it to Unilever for reportedly $1 billion. And you then found yourself on the other side of that. And you led the business for a while. And then a couple of years later, in early 2021, you stepped away And I remember you used the phrase when we were on the phone in 2020, you were like, I think I have a few more months here and then I'm going to take a bow, which is a statement that I loved and I started using after that. But once you took the bow, or even once you sold the business, what was that experience like for you emotionally?
You know, it's funny. People always ask me, was it hard to say goodbye to your baby? And my answer surprises a lot of people because it really wasn't hard at all. I ran Dollar Shave Club for 10 years from 2011 to 2021, and it changed my life in all the ways you might expect. It developed my career in all the ways you might expect, but I never thought of it as my life's work. I knew that at some point it would be time to move on to something else. And I could have stayed longer, but I had been there for 10 years and I had learned so much, both in the private phase and also in the owned by Unilever phase. And I thought that my learning journey was complete. I didn't see myself developing either as a person or as an executive anymore in that role. And so it was actually quite easy for me to put it down and step away. So I think, and then begins the journey of figuring out, quote unquote, what you're going to do next, which is the other question that people ask you all the time. What are you going to get into now? Are you going to start something else? You get all the questions, and that's a whole other scissors. Yeah, it's a whole other layer of emotion when that comes. But yeah, I think like selling the company was a really unique experience. Running the company afterwards, an incredible experience and a great learning experience. In some ways, I learned more in that phase than I did in the first phase, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, it was not an emotional moment stepping away.
Mm. So when you think about your internal drive and what your mental state and motivation was from before you sold the company to after you sold the company, was there something in you that fundamentally changed or not?
I think there's a misconception, at least as it feels like a misconception to me, that after you have a successful financial exit from a company that you started, that you suddenly become a more relaxed version of yourself automatically because you don't have the same financial concerns necessarily that you had before, and you feel like you've proven to yourself and to the world that you can do all the things that you thought you could do. And while some of those things are true, or while those things may be true, the internal wiring that led you to start the thing in the first place doesn't really change. And I can't speak for every entrepreneur. I can only speak for myself. But that desire to create, that desire to build doesn't go away. That you still find yourself wanting to go out and, make worlds and build things. And it takes a lot of discipline and work to be thoughtful, strategic, and discerning about when to flex that muscle, when to deploy those energies, because you can in some ways self-destructively overcreate and overbuild and over-rev. Listen, I hate to liken it to being addicted to any sort of substance because, those are tragic addictions, and so I'm not comparing it to those. But in a way, the entrepreneur is a dreamer, and you can be addicted to building. You can be addicted to creating. You can be addicted. I mean, it's in some ways it's a creation fantasy. And so you really have to be disciplined with your own mind. And that takes a lot of work, and also bumping into a lot of walls before you're self-aware enough to know like that same wiring that led you to start the thing in the first place can also short circuit and lead you down some, I don't want to say destructive paths, but down some dead ends.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a saying that one's appetite grows with eating.
Yeah, who said that?
A very wise man. May have been you at some point.
No, it's not mine. It's not mine.
But you can't deprogram yourself, right? With a natural proclivity to build to see something to fruition and then be maniacally focused on it for the better part of a decade, right? You can't just switch it off. Have you found that in these last couple years where you don't have one thing that you're actively building, is there pain around that for you? Do you wish you could switch it off?
So I wouldn't say it's not true that I'm not building, because I have been writing a screenplay for the last, 18, 19, 20 months. And that's sort of what I get up and do every day for the first couple hours while my brain is at its kind of most creative and sharpest. So I do have something. It's got to go somewhere. It can't go nowhere. I think you can try to deprogram yourself, and that will take a lot of work. Yeah. So I think the channel, you do need an outlet for it. I don't think I don't have pain around that, because I find places to go put it.
To channel it.
Yeah. The question is whether or not they're going to be, dead ends or something that sprouts into something really interesting.
Yes. Do you have some kind of a pause practice or something that you find kind of like grounds you and makes you happier that isn't a creative act?
Well, I've been meditating since 2012, and I do it twice a day. It's the Vedic school of meditation, and it's more or less the same as transcendental meditation. And that's a twice a day reset for my brain and, a total recharge. When I was running the company, I would take the afternoon meditation sometimes in my car, and sometimes when you meditate, like your head kind of slumps over and, it looks like you're sleeping. And I'm sure my employees would come out and look at me sleeping, so to speak, in my car and wondering why they've chosen to work with this guy. But after that afternoon meditation, I could go another 9 innings. It was amazing. So it was a total reset, total recharge. I still do it. I can probably count on two hands the number of times I've missed one in the last, 14 years.
That is incredible.
12 years, sorry.
Yeah. And for those listeners who aren't as familiar, Vedic meditation is a mantra meditation where you're given a Sanskrit sound, is the best way to describe it, and you spend 20 minutes twice a day, generally once in the morning, once in the afternoon, internally repeating this sound.
I can't recommend it highly enough to people. It's one of those things that I can say has truly changed my life.
And it is also, Mike talks about it effortlessly, but it is incredibly hard to be consistent with this practice, especially the afternoon meditation. I also practice Vedic meditation for a period of time, but I have to admit I have fallen off of my practice. And so this may be the conversation that inspires me to get back on the horse.
I hope so. I could also connect you to my teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Who's fantastic.
And it's
local.
in Los Angeles? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
she travels all over, but she's based in Los Angeles. And
does she do the kind of thing where you can always join up like as many times as you want to a refresh class? Because my New York teacher does that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And she's great. And sometimes it just takes the right teacher to explain it to you in their way so that it lands. And then you are like, oh, I really want to stick with this now.
Wow. Interesting. Well,
yeah.
Good on you again for that.
Yeah.
I knew you were a sensitive New Age guy.
Yeah. Big time.
And so something interesting happened recently. So you obviously, Dollar Shave Club is known for this tremendous growth and success. At some point, I think, you had 3 million subscribers or more on the platform, which is, remarkable. Something like that's 2% of the U.S. male population. And last year, Unilever decided to actually sell Dollar Shave Club. And so it was bought by
65% of it.
65% of it.
Yeah. So they still retain 35%.
They sell. Okay. So they own a portion, but they did sell what we'll call controlling interest.
Yep.
And that probably makes people scratch their head a little bit. Like, why, 1 year would they decide to make this big splashy acquisition, and then less than a decade later, they make this move, but they obviously still want to participate in the future growth of it since they're hanging on to a piece of it. Could you talk a little bit like what's with that?
One of the things that Dollar Shave Club suffered from in its Unilever days was a lack of sort of a permanent home within the organization. It was at first sort of, the acquisition was led by a gentleman who was the president of Unilever North America, but we reported into the president of personal care, who was European based. And then after, a short-ish time, both of those gentlemen turned over, and one left the company, one moved up and became the CEO of the company, and then a third board member moved to a different territory. And then shortly after that, without going through the play-by-play, Dollar Shave Club got passed around to a few different places within the organization. And for a while, it felt like, a brand without a champ, so to speak. And in a big organization like Unilever, you need a champ. And I don't know that there was a champ. And this happened after I stepped down from the company, so I can't say for sure what led to this specific decision. But I think that, these types of global corporations kind of periodically change their focus and what they believe. They change their view on what they believe is core to their future success. And you've seen Unilever over the last couple of years change strategy a couple times. They did a CEO change. I now have read recently they're spinning off a bunch of their food businesses, including
ice cream. They've already announced, which is they own Ben and Jerry's, they own Popsicle, they own Magnum. It's a jewel for them in a lot of ways. Ben and Jerry's especially.
Yeah, and when Dollar Shave Club was acquired, which was right around the time Sir Kensington's was acquired, ice cream was kind of lauded as like the biggest, best success category. I mean, personal care maybe above that, but people always bragged about the ice cream business. So I was shocked to hear that as well. So, long-winded answer, but I don't really know. But I think what they found in the partner that they sold it to was somebody that was going to really embrace it, see the upside, help bring the brand back to its kind of original roots, and begin a regrowth journey.
Yeah, Dollar Shave Club found its champ,
so to speak.
That definitely resonates with me, and it's interesting. We sold our businesses to the same multinational. And I realized so much in that about the power and the importance of tenure and dedication. Like as a founder, or even as a leader in what we'll call a pure play company, like a brand that has, or a company that has one brand, is you're maniacally focused on making that brand work. And you essentially have like one strategy, and you're just going to maybe move around a little bit in that strategy, but you have one type of product line, one category that you're maniacally focused on. And the way that these bigger players work that have matrixed organization, big portfolios, it's like, oh, well, the market and Wall Street, they want one priority 1 year, and maybe it's like growth over margin. And so everybody sort of piles in and leans into this part of the portfolio, and then other pieces get divested or they get kind of ignored. And then 3 years later, a different part in the economic cycle, when the investors and the market prioritizes something else, then everybody shuffles to the other side of the ship, and the other side of the ship starts to, lean in that direction. And it did strike me as kind of odd that I realized that a lot of people will be in leadership roles for 2.5 years, and then they'll cycle them and put them somewhere else around the globe, or for the next sort of part of their career journey. But I think having spent 10 years working on ketchup, I may have been the world's longest tenured expert on ketchup in a professional setting. Maybe even beating the people at Heinz, right?
High honor.
Because they move from one dressing to another to, craft singles and things like this. And I think that people often overlook the power of that tenure, and they don't necessarily recognize that there is kind of this weakness that can express itself in the form of things being neglected, like that super funny YouTube video that I think Dan Deacon did, where he says, "Not my chair, not my problem." If you don't find your home in a big organization, it's kind of not my chair, not my problem.
That's right. I think that's right.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
That touches on also something.
Wait, can we do a 2-second bio break?
Sure.
Cool. Thank you.
So I just think it's funny that we took a bio break so that Mike could go to the bathroom, but on his way out, he grabbed my phone from the table, and I don't know whether he intended to do that, but he's going to probably sit down and discover that he cannot unlock my phone.
took your phone by accident.
I was wondering if was this some elaborate ruse, or are you taking lewd photographs?
No, I have the same.
Okay. So that also reminds me, I want to touch on something you said before, which was that perhaps you learned more after the acquisition during the Unilever phase than before, which is actually a sentiment that I've also shared before, and I'm curious. Tell me about that.
Well, I think, when I launched Dollar Shave Club in 2011, it was a D2C business. And this was, as we talked about, this was early D2C when there weren't a lot of people doing D2C the way that we did it. And we were great at that game. We just kept playing the hits and it was working, and it was working really well. Once we were acquired by Unilever, the calculus changed. No longer were we, a company doing whatever we wanted to do. We were a company that was part of a larger organization that had other men's grooming brands, and you have to kind of play nice in the sandbox with those other men's grooming brands because Unilever has Axe and they have Dove Men Plus Care, both huge brands, compared to Dollar Shave Club, because there were so many other D2C companies competing for the same ad inventory on the Instagrams of the world and the Facebooks of the world that we just had to pay so much that it would take 3+ years to make the money back on a customer. And so that was part of the process that triggered our move into retail, and learning how Unilever thinks about retail was an education also. So the exposure to everything that Unilever did, not just in our category, and the thinking behind it, and then also how they thought about our business and our category, was all highly educational.
Absolutely.
Whereas when we were in the private phase, it was kind of like we build our own playbook, we run it, and it works.
Yes, I can definitely relate to that, and feeling like when you're running an independent company, in a lot of ways you have no one to teach you. You are the pioneer, and you're pioneering this new channel, this new business. But then once you hop over, right, on the Unilever side, there are actually all of these experts that have these well-honed strategies, and they are willing and excited to teach you, and you can sort of learn these tried and true channels. So that resonates with me. I often say that the first 7 years when we were an independent company is like playing jazz. You make it up as you go along. You invent new genres.
Yeah.
There's kind of no masters there. There's no music that you're playing from. But then on the corporate side at Unilever, it's classical, right? That's the classical training. They've got strategies, how to work with retailers and how to think about price pack architecture and how to think about, media budgets and global campaigns that have basically been honed through evolution and Darwinian selection over the 120 years since their founding. So I can very much relate to that. Do you have any advice for entrepreneurs that you'd want to impart sitting where you sit now?
I would almost say, like, the entrepreneur will obviously need great advice and guidance and complementary skill sets to get where they're going. Dollar Shave Club would not have been as successful as it was if I hadn't had complementary skill sets at every stage, truly at every stage. But an entrepreneur, when you say advice for an entrepreneur, I say someone who's cut out to be a successful entrepreneur is going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out, him or herself. Because that's, I think, the key ingredient is your ability to figure it out. The ability to look at the world and say, here's my vision, and here's what I need to do to get from here to there, from A to B, from zero to launch, or from launch to whatever's next. That skill set, that gene, I feel like is the common thread between success that runs between successful entrepreneurs.
You know who else recently said that same sentiment? Barack Obama.
Really?
He said,
well, we talk all the time. And,
yeah, I'm sure.
He
was on stage and
close friend. And
he said, there's all this advice that's given to young people in the workplace. And my advice is just figure out how to get things done.
Yeah.
And I love that because that is often kind of overlooked to be, maniacally focused on being able to get things done and get things from A to B. And a lot of people are obsessed with who their advisor network is or who their investors are. But in reality, like it's on you to pull a rabbit out of a hat and almost be like antisocial in your focus. to move the ball down the field.
Yeah, you have to be relentless. I mean, something that, by the way, also most of what Barack Obama said, I've said first. So that's just like a little known fact. Most people
Okay,
don't.
maybe he'll tag you in his next post.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good about it. I don't really
Does
make
he
a
steal
thing.
your playlist too
all
before
the
he
time.
Yeah.
The whole thing, literally. The
Right.
guy's like the most unoriginal guy you'll ever meet. So it's like, but I'm good about it because it's like good for
You're going to be the bigger man in a situation like that.
constantly. Yeah, constantly. Yeah, that's masculinity.
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
That's leadership.
Yep. I think we're done.
Tell me, what are you spending your time on today? What is exciting for you now? What is energizing?
I've been writing a screenplay for about 18 months now, a little bit longer. A process that I have found to be very lonely and very challenging because I've never done it before. And it's been a challenging process, hopefully a rewarding one. I think I'm almost done. I know I've got some more work to do for sure, but I'm just about to finish like the first draft, and that's cool. I don't know that that's inspiring me. I think it would inspire me if
Is it possessing you the way we talked about entrepreneurial possession?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, again, this affliction that we suffer, which I don't know what we would call that affliction, but that affliction applies to anything that I really sink my teeth into. If I'm doing it, I'm going all in. And so I've gone all in, which has been good for the project, but in some ways not necessarily good for my mental health because I'm a collaborative guy. No, this is about going deep. I'm on the psychologist's
you clearly haven't
couch.
had enough mud water if you're not getting vulnerable.
Time for a spot?
Yeah, mud water for masculine vulnerability. Do you want to be more sensitive to your male friends and your lady friends? Drink mud, now with more chaga.
Writing a screenplay, at least the way I've chosen to do it, the first draft is to do it by myself. And
solitary.
Well, yeah, I want to do the first draft myself. It doesn't mean that I won't need help. I absolutely will need help, from other storytellers, whether those are other writers or directors. But I absolutely have chosen the solo path for the first crack. And that is lonely. I need to ping off of the energy and creativity of other human beings to really, it's like the old saying, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And that's just not applicable in the sort of business building, bring complementary resources to you type example. It's also in a creative endeavor. Everything that I've ever created, whether it was a TV commercial that I wrote for Dollar Shave Club or even the original video for Dollar Shave Club, all of those things got better once other people came into the project.
Yes.
And so being lonely is a byproduct of this path that I've chosen for draft one. So, because it's you and the computer.
Do you think you're going to put a writer's room together so that you actually have a collaborative space with other pros to whip it into shape?
After the first draft.
After the first draft.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Yep.
That's very cool. All right. Now we get into some of our hot takes. Are you glad that social media exists, or do you wish it never existed?
I'm glad it exists.
Good. I have another question that I ask people. Oh, and can you just make sure that bowl doesn't fall?
The bowl that's been here for an hour?
That's a sentimental bowl.
I think we need to talk about this sentimental bowl.
We can talk about...
Can we get a shot of the sentimental bowl? Why is this a sentiment? This bowl's
I got that
been
on
sitting
my honeymoon at the Tsukiji Fish Market in Tokyo. And it's very hard to find replacements of those.
Why would you even risk it then by bringing it here?
Because I value our friendship.
Well,
and I knew that you would treat it with care.
Well, I'm gonna hold the bowl as I hope to receive the gifts of the universe in this bowl.
So I also have a section called Everyone's a Critic. And I pick something and I ask a critique of it. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Why? What do you think of it? Shark Tank. What are your views? Are you pro? Are you anti? What are your thoughts on Shark Tank?
Pro. Yeah.
And why?
Well, because what you have in Shark Tank is you're teaching people how to pitch businesses. You're inspiring people to start businesses. You're inspiring people to follow their idea no matter how crazy. I believe probably more businesses have been created because of Shark Tank than otherwise would have been created if there hadn't been a Shark Tank. It's probably net positive. I'm sure it's inspired a lot of people.
Love that. Another beautifully optimistic take. Excellent. What is something you know to be true that you wish the rest of the world understood?
Oh, wow. Great question. That this existence in this world that we live in is just one of many in the universe.
Lovely. Are you religious?
I'm spiritual.
You're spiritual.
Deeply spiritual. And I am curious of the teachings of many different religions.
Yes. Sensitive new age guy. You're a classic snag. And we ask all of our guests for one good recipe. Walk me through a recipe that you cook in cookbook level detail.
I'm not a listen. I wish I had a better answer for you because I'm not a thoughtful chef.
I can
these
feed
days.
you an answer.
Well, nice pun, but that wouldn't be authentic. I'm gonna offer something
Because you've made it for me, but continue.
Oh, well, that's what I was gonna talk about.
Power toast.
Power toast, absolutely. So if you join our starfish group, and you become kind of inner starfish circle, at some point in the wintertime, you'll come back to my place. We'll jump in the hot tub and I'll make you a power toast. That's an invite to all starfish out there. Power toast in the hot tub. Nothing warms you up. You don't really need the hot tub to warm you up after you've had the power toast. But power toast it's pretty transformative. It's a piece of toast and you put olive oil on the toast. And then you put a sliced habanero pepper on the toast. And then at that point, it's sort of choose your own adventure. You can put tomato on top, avocado on top, a fried egg on top. But the real essence of it is the bread, the olive oil,
What is your
the
bread
habanero.
choice?
It can vary. But
Because when you served it to me, it was a very dense, seedy, grainy, like action-packed piece of toast.
I think the denser, the better. Can be gluten-free or not. Doesn't really matter.
Right.
But ultimately, I think it's really about the olive oil and the salt and the habanero. That combination is a foundation on which you can build a temple.
Absolutely.
A temple of good health.
My toast is a temple,
And
and
so-
power is my religion.
Yeah, it's just like the spice will get your day going. The olive oil is sort of an elixir for great health. All the greats will tell you that it's olive oil.
Absolutely.
Olive oil, olive oil, olive oil. So power toast is really where it's at for me.
Lovely.
I used to make a good gumbo, but I haven't made that in years.
Well, in the next episode, you can walk us through your gumbo. Well, where can people find you if they want to follow along on your adventures?
They can't. There's really nowhere.
Okay.
I'm not really super active on social. I'm not really in a broadcast mode. For a long time I was in broadcast mode when I was running Dollar Shave Club, and that was a necessary evil. But I've really enjoyed just kind of watching things unfold from the chair of someone who's excited to get back in the game in one way or another. But I'm not really transmitting that out there just yet. So I will speak through my friends,
Yes.
like you, who can act as this.
So he's in hermit mode until his screenplay is turned into a film, and then we'll have you
until
back
I
on
get
the show.
rejected if I get rejected from it, and that'll be another failure we can talk about.
Oh, good material. All right. Well, thank you, Mike, for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And good
really
to have
fun.
a bro from another mo.
Hell yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to At Large. Today's episode was produced by Sickbird Productions. Our theme song is Son of Sanford by Motion Worker. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and by email at atlargeshow.com. Follow me at SWH Norton on Instagram and Twitter, and DM me about the guests you want to hear on the show.